The reason that pornography is an addiction is that it actually changes the way that the brain functions. When I was a kid and tried smoking cigarettes, it was so gross. When we're young, we're coming together because, I'm horny and you're horny and we've got 10 minutes of a break, so let's take care of this.
I read a recent statistic about, pornography, and first it was just increasing in the US, and even in India now, it's just like above the charts. And I think that's probably because, again, the values and scars are just getting maybe deteriorating over time. So what are your thoughts about that, and how can we divert our attention to going on that track of watching porn, of sense pleasures?
Great question. So it's important to realize, first of all, that pornography is an addiction. It's not just a vice. Things that are just vices, you can say, abstain from that, pull away from that. Things that are addictions are more subtle. They're also much more dangerous because it's actually harder to pull people away from them. The reason that pornography is an addiction is that it actually changes the way that the brain functions in the same way that alcohol and drugs do. So does pornography. It actually changes the way that our reward centers of our brain operate. Which means, number one, we need to be very, very, very careful about not making it nearly so available or accessible so that people don't actually start. It's like the best way to deal with alcohol and drug addiction is make sure that nobody starts. Yeah. Phase 2, of course, is getting people off of it. Mm-hmm. But phase 1 is making sure that it's not so available and accessible that people continue to get addicted.
Yeah, it's like when you've tasted non-veg, leaving it is, of course, very difficult. If you've not even tasted it, it's not even in your mouth, that flavor.
Well, see, that's interesting to me because I think that non-veg is so gross that I can't actually imagine that anybody would eat it. I mean, it reminds me of when I was a kid and tried smoking cigarettes. Mm-hmm. And it was so gross. I mean, you cough and you're like, blah, blah, and you can't actually imagine why anyone would deliberately, consciously, given that they had a choice, why they would do this. But what happens with cigarettes is the nicotine is actually an addictive substance. Okay. Fortunately, meat is not an addictive substance. So people actually should be able to give that up much, much more easily. The dilemma with pornography is what happens is it actually changes the way that the reward centers work in the brain. And so people get actually addicted to that sexual arousal, that sexual release, and they get to a point where they are unable to experience sexual arousal without the pornography.
So it affects the relationships later in life. Deeply and awfully. Talk to anybody who's married to someone who's addicted to pornography, and they will tell you how horrible it is. Talk to anybody who themselves is addicted to pornography and is looking to break that addiction. It's horrible because here you are now in this beautiful relationship. You're getting married, you're trying to, rekindle your marriage. But if you need to see pornography in order for you to be sexually aroused, well, you've just created a situation in your own relationship of great detriment and great difficulty and great challenge. So, yeah, it's a horrible addiction. It's way too available. I mean, if I were government, I would do whatever was necessary to curtail it. I do not think it falls under free speech. And the reason is whether it's women,
whether it's men, whether it's children. Nobody would make a living doing that if they had a choice. And if we have a society in which people are so bad off that their only way to feed themselves is to do this, we've got a societal problem. So I would not, again, if I ran the world, I would not hide under the it's free speech, it's free expression, it's art, because it's not. It's objectification. It's subjugation. I don't care whether that person has signed a release that they agree to do it or not. If they had a choice and another way to make money and another way to live, nobody in their right mind would voluntarily subject themselves to that level of personal debasement. And as far as children, of course, I mean, we know it's incredibly criminal. So I would crack down on it to whatever extent I could. I would, make sure that internet sites couldn't even connect to those pages. But I think also that it goes along, as you said, with our value system of as we're getting more and more addicted to and attached to our devices, we're starting to look to that device for all of our friends, right? Facebook gives us friends, this one gives us friends, that gives us friends. We forget that actually my real friends are supposed to be in real life. And I start mistaking a Facebook friend for a real friend. I start mistaking followers on Instagram for a real community. And slowly, I start mistaking getting myself off while I'm watching pornography with actually having a meaningful, monogamous, dharmic relationship. And we all suffer, and community suffers, and society suffers, and civilization suffers.
And what do you recommend? Abstinence, especially, I'm talking about the youth who are very young, and because I study at a university where they've had this subject and they talked about how sexual energy, the ojas, is essentially if you prevent yourself from indulging in that or pornography or masturbation, that energy goes up to creativity, and that allows you to essentially become, even if you're talking about material wealth or material success. So would you recommend abstinence as much as possible, especially when you're young and you don't really have the right sense of mind?
So I would recommend abstinence from pornography 100%. I see absolutely no good whatsoever coming out of pornography. I think all it does is objectify people. And it changes in a very, very harmful way, and in a way that's very difficult to undo the way that we think about sexual pleasure, the way that we think about romantic relationships, the whole psychology of it. So I would absolutely recommend total abstinence from pornography completely. In terms of abstinence from, sensual pleasure in general, the dilemma is that in our world, as you know, especially in the world of youth and university and young people, yes, what you have said about the ojas is absolutely true. It is the reason that sannyasis take vows of celibacy. Yes, it's an aspect of purity, but then the question arises, well, why? Why would it matter? Whoever started this. And the reason has to do with ojas, is that when you retain that energy of the body, that's where you get this incredible light and energy and connection to the divine, and that brilliance that they say the saints and the enlightened masters have. That if you're constantly releasing that energy into the world, you are depleting yourself of it. you end up with physical issues, immune system issues, issues of fatigue, issues of, irritability. There's so many emotional, psychological, physical, immunological aspects that have been shown to be connected to.
Mm-hmm. And correct me if I'm wrong, is there also something like with karmic imprints? Usually I've heard that when you have two individuals of different karmas, and then when you come together, there's something that, like you're also taking on their karma?
That's not something I've ever heard of. I've never heard that if you have a relationship with someone that you're taking on their karma, but your karmas are definitely entwined. Obviously, whoever you're interacting with on any level in life, there is a karmic connection and karmic threads that interweave. And based on the relationship that you get in, physical, romantic, friend, marriage, whatever it may be, you are consciously interweaving your karmic threads together. So any relationship, from a business relationship to a marriage, to a friend, to any kind of relationship, you want to be really careful about who you are mingling, not just physical bodies, but karmic threads with. That being said, there is this aspect, an important aspect of the ojas, of the physical energy, the energetic energy, the spiritual energy that gives us creativity, that gives us health in the body, in the mind, in the spirit. And the more I release that energy into the world, the less I have. However, in meaningful dharmic relationships, for those who are not celibates, for those who are not monastic, a relationship with calm, with this sensual coming together, can actually also be a very, very powerful way of having a deep spiritual experience, as long as that's the goal. As long as both people come together, number one, it's a dharmic relationship, it's committed, it's monogamous, it's all of the things that a, real container for dharma would have. Under that umbrella, in that container, knowing that we are coming together not just for 15 minutes or an hour of physical pleasure, but actually to experience the divine through merging together. That can in and of itself be a very powerful spiritual experience. But the intention is what matters. And typically when we're young, we're not coming together for a spiritual, dharmic connection of awakening. We're coming together because, I'm horny and you're horny and we've got 10 minutes of a break, so let's take care of this. And in that case, we're just letting go of our energies into the world and, creating mostly even more difficult situations for ourselves later on. Emotionally, psychologically, relationally, physically, on all of these levels.